deadlift twice your body weight. You think centuries of human progress have made you superior to ancient warriors. You're about to discover just how catastrophically wrong you are. Picture this. You're face to face with a Mongol warrior from the 13th century. No rules, no referees. Just you and one of history's most perfectly engineered killing machines. The encounter would be over before your brain could process what was happening. Not because you're weak, but because you're facing something that transcends everything you understand about human capability. Let me shatter every assumption you have about medieval warfare and show you why a single Mongol warrior would end you so quickly that historians would struggle to document your defeat. The Mongol Empire wasn't built by lucky barbarians or primitive nomads stumbling into conquest. It was forged by the most systematically trained, environmentally hardened, and tactically sophisticated warriors in human history. These weren't weekend warriors or seasonal soldiers. They were human weapons created through a training system so brutal and comprehensive that it makes modern special forces preparation look like summer camp. The transformation began before they could walk. Mongol children learned to ride horses before they learned to run. There's an ancient saying that captures this perfectly. Mongol born on a horse dies on a horse. This wasn't metaphorical. These children spent more time in saddles than on solid ground, developing balance, coordination, and horsemanship that would be physically impossible for anyone starting later in life. Boat riding was just the foundation. Every Mongol, warrior or not, was trained in archery with deadly precision. Men, women, children, elderly, everyone could handle a bow with accuracy that would embarrass modern Olympic archers. This wasn't hobby shooting or recreational hunting. This was systematic weapons training that turned every member of society into a potential combatant. The annual Great Hunt called the Guru Jan reveals the terrifying efficiency of their training system. Thousands of horsemen would encircle massive areas of wilderness, gradually closing the circle over days or weeks until all the game was trapped in an ever-shrinking space. Each warrior was allocated exactly one arrow. Miss your shot and face public ridicule. This wasn't just hunting. It was live fire training that combined horsemanship, archery, tactical coordination, and psychological pressure into one devastating exercise. Modern hunters with high-tech equipment, GPS, and unlimited ammunition struggled to consistently hit stationary targets. These warriors had to hit moving animals from horseback with a single shot, while maintaining formation with thousands of other riders. The precision and coordination required would break most modern minds before the physical demands even began. Now, let's talk about the environment that forged these warriors. Mongolia's climate is one of the harshest on Earth. Summer temperatures soar, while winter nights regularly drop to 40 degrees C. Many years see temperatures plummet to 50. These weren't occasional cold snaps. These were standard seasonal conditions that lasted for months. While you complain about your gym being too cold or too hot, Mongol warriors lived, trained, and fought in conditions that would hospitalize most modern people within hours. Their bodies adapted to temperature extremes that would shut down your nervous system. Their cardiovascular systems developed efficiency levels that modern medicine can barely measure. Their pain tolerance was conditioned through daily exposure to environmental brutality that makes your toughest workout feel like gentle stretching. This environmental hardening created physiological advantages that go beyond simple toughness. Their metabolisms operated at efficiency levels that allowed them to function on minimal food and water for extended periods. Their circulation systems prevented frostbite and temperatures that would cause immediate tissue death in modern bodies. Their respiratory system extracted maximum oxygen from thin mountain air that would leave you gasping and dizzy. But physical conditioning was only part of their superiority. The weapons technology they mastered would make your modern advantages completely irrelevant. The Mongol composite bow represents one of the most sophisticated pieces of military engineering in human history. These weren't simple wooden sticks with strings. They were precisely crafted weapons made from laminated layers of horn, wood, and sinew. The construction process alone reveals their technological supremacy. Master craftsmen would select specific types of wood, harvest horn from particular animals, and process sinew with techniques that took years to perfect. The lamination process created composite materials with strength-to ratios that rival modern engineering. These bows were both incredibly powerful and remarkably light, allowing warriors to carry multiple weapons without sacrificing mobility. The performance specifications are staggering. Mongol composite bows had effective ranges exceeding 400 yards. Compare that to the famous English longbow, which maxed out around 250 yards. Mongol warriors could accurately hit targets at distances where you couldn't even see them clearly. They could engage enemies before those enemies knew they were under attack. The technical superiority extended beyond just range. While European archers drew their bowstrings with 3 fingers, Mongols used thumb draw technique with reinforced thumb rings. This method not only allowed faster shooting, but enabled higher draw weights before finger failure. Modern archery experts argue that thumb draw is biomechanically superior for rapid fire accuracy. Each warrior typically carried 2 bows into battle, one optimized for long-range engagements, another for close-quarters combat. They used specialized quivers mounted on belts and saddles that allowed rapid arrow access from multiple positions. Skilled archers could hold 2 or 3 arrows in their shooting hand for consecutive shots, without reaching for their quiver. Threat of fire was devastating. Contemporary accounts describe Mongol archers loosing multiple arrows permanent while riding at full gallop. Modern people struggle to draw basic recurve bows consistently while standing still. These warriors were firing rapid, accurate shots from horseback while maneuvering at speeds that would terrify modern equestrians. The arrows themselves were precision instruments of death. Different arrowhead designs for different tactical purposes, broadheads for unarmored targets, bodkins for penetrating armor, fire arrows for siege warfare, and specialized designs for psychological warfare. Each arrow was handcrafted to exact specifications that maximize lethality for its intended purpose. Your modern advantages mean nothing against this level of weapons mastery. Your gym strength can't draw these bows effectively. Your hand-eye coordination can't match their accuracy. Your reaction time can't compete with reflexes honed through decades of life or death training. And that's assuming you could even see them coming before their arrows found their mark. But a weapons mastery was just one dimension of their overwhelming superiority. Firm. They had no record of my mother being brought in, and they suggested I'd try calling her directly to make sure she was okay. So that's what I did. I stepped outside and called my mom's landline, and she answered. She said she'd been sleeping and wanted to know why I was calling so late. I didn't want to scare her, so I just said I was checking up on her and told her to go back to bed. And that's when the heart-sinking realization hit me. This had been a setup. Someone had deliberately given me false information to get me out of my house. I jumped back in my car, furious that I'd been tricked so easily. When I pulled into my driveway, the front door was still closed, just like I'd left it. For a moment I thought, maybe I was being paranoid and nothing had happened. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew I'd been robbed. The house had been completely ransacked. My TV was gone along with my laptop and small jewelry collection I kept in my bedroom. But as I looked around more carefully, I realized the thieves had taken some really strange things too. Family photos had been removed from their frames. Not the frames themselves, just the actual photos. My prescription bottles from the bathroom medicine cabinet had been emptied and taken. It was insane. They had taken things that had relatively little monetary value, yet huge sentimental value to me. It was sadistic. I'm telling you, there's no reason a thief would ever take family photos. There just isn't. I called the police immediately, but I was already feeling defeated at that point. Deep down, I knew the thieves were long gone, and there was nothing I could do about it. I told the police everything. I remembered the phone call verbatim, and after hearing it, the police reached the same conclusion I had. Whoever had been on the other end had known things about my mother and I that no stranger could possibly know. For the life of me, I couldn't even come up with a list of people who would have that information, or even ways that someone could have gotten that information in the first place. The officers told me to feel free to call back whenever I had something concrete. Then they left. I was utterly baffled. Just imagine how unsettled you'd feel if some stranger knew enough about you to lure you out of your house. The theft itself was bad enough, but the fact that they targeted family photos and medical information suggested it wasn't just about quick cash. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were planning something longer term, possibly identity theft or some other scheme that required personal documentation. But over the next few weeks, nothing else happened. Even though my mother, quote, can't remember who she might have talked to about her personal info, I'm pretty confident that she's the source of the leak. She surprisingly has a lot of friends for a woman her age, and knowing her, she probably said too, much to the wrong person. I've warned my mother about that very thing, and she's finally agreed to be more careful about who she gives personal information to. But I can't shake the feeling that we're still being watched by someone who knows way too much about our lives and isn't finished with whatever they're planning. Either way, I recently got a Ring camera, so hopefully that's enough of a deterrent. If anything else happens, I'll send an update. Music. I'm a single guy in my early 30s, and I've been living alone in this rented house for over a year now. It's a nice little place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it's comfortable and the rent is reasonable. I've gotten into good routine here and really feel like I'd made it my home. The incident happened on a Thursday night around 11. I was getting ready for bed when I heard aggressive pounding on my front door. Not knocking, but actual pounding, like someone was trying to break it down. I looked out the window but couldn't see much because of how poorly the porch light is positioned. Despite not being able to see who it was and the aggressiveness of the knocking, I'm a pretty buff guy, so I wasn't scared or anything, more so irritated and confused. I opened the front door, careful to keep the screen door shut, as an added layer of protection. I'm not sure what I was expecting to see, but what I did see was surprising to say the least. There was this extremely agitated man standing there. He looked to be maybe a few years older than me. He was average height, had disheveled hair, and was wearing clothes that looked like they had been slept in multiple nights in a row. But what really caught my attention was how angry and unstable he seemed. His eyes were darting around and he was breathing heavily, like he'd been running or was having some kind of panic attack. He was also pacing around like he couldn't keep his feet on the ground. Before I could even ask what he wanted, he started yelling that this was his house and demanding that I let him in. He said I was trespassing and that he was going to call the police if I didn't get out immediately. I thought he was either on drugs or having some kind of mental health crisis, or maybe a combination of the two. I tried to calm him down and explain that he had the wrong house, but he became even more agitated.
It's a nice little place in a quiet neighborhood.
That's when he started rattling off details about the house that made me freeze up.
I've gotten into a good
I don't
routine
even
here.
remember
I really
everything
feel
he
like I've
said,
made it my home.
but he knew several
The incident
things
happened on a
about the
Thursday
house
night
that you
around
couldn't
half
observe
past
from
11.
outside it. Details that only someone who had actually lived there would know. Like, for example, he knew that the door for the master bedroom is poorly designed and bangs into the toilet. He knew that the back door sticks and you have to lift it slightly while turning the doorknob. There was some other stuff too, but I really can't remember it all. I don't think I even said anything while he was talking. I was just standing there in shock. But that was only the beginning. It was about to get much, much weirder. Through the screen door, he pulled out a folder and started showing me documentation. He had what appeared to be a lease agreement with his name on it dated from about 6 months before I'd moved in. He had pieces of mail addressed to him at this address. Everything looked official, though I suspected it had been forged somehow. But the most unsettling part was when he pulled out his phone and started showing me photos. They were literal pictures of him inside my house, sitting on my current couch, watching TV, cooking in the kitchen, even lying down in what was now my bedroom. The photos looked recent and completely legitimate. They weren't obviously photoshopped or staged, and most of them weren't solo. They had other people in them, all of whom I'd never seen before. He showed me one photo that he claimed was from this past 4th of July, just a few months ago. It was a selfie taken by a woman I didn't recognize. In it, the woman, him, and a few other people were facing the camera and smiling at the kitchen table. There was a box of fireworks off to the side, and the detail and context of the picture made it look completely authentic. That's when I genuinely started questioning my own memory and sanity. How could this person have all this evidence if they never lived here? I started wondering if I somehow blocked out memories of sharing the house with someone, and if I was the one having some kind of psychological breakdown. It was freaky, especially since I knew for a fact that I had been home on the 4th of July, so the pictures made even less sense. The whole situation was so surreal that I told them I was going to call the police to sort everything out, not even in an antagonistic way. I just didn't know what else to do. I figured they could check the records and determine what was going on. But the moment I mentioned calling the cops, the guy's demeanor changed completely. He suddenly became very calm and said he'd wait outside while I made the call. Then he just walked away from the door and disappeared into the darkness. I watched from the window, but I couldn't see where he went. When the police arrived about 10 minutes later, I explained the whole bizarre situation. They told me I should try reaching out to my landlord to get in contact with the previous tenants, and that I might get some answers that way. I had all their required documentation proving I was renting this house, but when I offered to show it to them, they waved it off. They said whoever had been on my doorstep was probably just going through a mental episode, and as long as they were gone, I should just carry on with my life. Then they left. I wasn't just going to sit there and be satisfied with that, though. Whether or not that guy had left still left the question of how in the world he had all that evidence. With my landlord's help, I was eventually able to get in contact with the previous tenants. I should mention that my landlord had no idea what had happened either and said he didn't know anyone matching that guy's description and had never rented to anyone like that. But anyway, the old tenants also had no idea who I was talking about. They said they'd never lived with anyone matching his description, and they lived in the house alone for 3 years before moving out. They were just as confused as I was about how this stranger could have such detailed knowledge of the house and apparently legitimate photos of himself inside of it. For the next 2 weeks, I was constantly on edge, but nothing happened, and I started to think that maybe it had just been some elaborate scam that had failed. But of course that turned out to be mostly wishful thinking. One night I came home from a night on the town with my friends to find my house completely ransacked. It wasn't like a typical burglary where someone grabs obvious valuables and runs.
As I was.
The place
about
was
how this
completely
stranger could
turned
have such
upside down,
detailed
like
knowledge
someone
of the
had been
house,
looking for
apparently
something
legitimate
specific.
photos of himself inside of it.
What that thing
For the
was,
next 2 weeks, I was
had no
constantly on
idea.
edge, but nothing
The
happened.
craziest
and I
part
started
is
to
that
think that
most of
maybe it had just
my
been some
electronics
elaborate
and other
scam that had
valuable
failed.
items were still
But of
there.
course, that turned out to be
Despite the
mostly
fact that
wishful
the
thinking.
rooms they were in were completely
One night, I came
trashed. The police found no signs of forced entry, which suggested that whoever did it had a copy of my key. Given the timing and connection to the strange incident 2 weeks earlier, it seemed obvious that the same person was responsible. The police took things more seriously after that, and so did my landlord. He replaced all the locks in the house, immediately and free of charge, and also installed additional security measures. The going theory, and the one I believe, is that some crazy person really does believe he lives in my house and broke in to look for his personal belongings or something. And okay, sure, that's problematic enough on its own, but that does absolutely nothing to explain how he had all that documentation, let alone literal copies of my house key. I wish I had the sense to take a closer look at that so-called lease agreement. He had shown me because I might have been able to get his name, but in the moment I just wasn't thinking clearly. The documents don't even bother me that much. All that stuff could have been easily forged or altered, including the alleged pieces of mail. What freaks me out to my core, though, are the pictures. I have no explanation for any of that stuff. It's possible. They're really old pictures whose dates are doctored. But even if that's the case, it still doesn't explain how my landlord, who's owned that house his entire life, didn't recognize him. One of my friends suggested that I'm up against something not fully natural. I don't believe in that kind of stuff, but I will say that I've had this constant creepy feeling hanging over me whenever I'm in my own home, which is most of the time. I can't even begin to rationalize the whole thing. I just hope that's the end of it.